out of the 4 times that I've done this. Okay, awesome. 3 newcomers. We've got some OGs. Awesome. Well, today I was really inspired. So my nanny's here and on Wednesdays and Thursdays, and she is an incredible gardener. She has taught me so much. My husband and I are very not green thumbers. Anybody have like I don't know what would be the opposite of that, a brown thumb, maybe? Definitely not a green thumber, but trying to be. Definitely not a plant mom. Is anybody a plant mom in the house? Love that for you. I have successfully kept a plant alive for 3 years. That was a housewarming plant. So that is a success for me. But, you know, gardening and all these different things, they just take time. And if you're new here and you don't know like a little bit of my husband and I's testimony, we went through a lot last year. We went through cancer. We went through 6 months of chemo. I was pregnant. I was a postpartum mom. Definitely not what we were expecting in our second year of marriage and at 31 years old. So we didn't really feel like we had the capacity to garden, to steward anything else. And so for us, as entrepreneurs, it just makes a lot more sense to delegate many of the things in our life. And lawn care is definitely one of them. We don't even own a lawnmower, probably never will, to be honest, because it's quite literally doesn't make dollars and cents for us by the time that we have to take the time to do all that. So last year is funny because our neighbor's kid actually mows our lawn. And, once a week he'd come out. He's the sweetest, like 17-year-old, 18-year-old guy. In fact, we tried to hire him full time for our poop scooping business and are trying to convince his dad to not let him go to college because he doesn't want to go to college. And his parents are forcing him. And we're like, your son could make 60 grand or spend 200 grand when he doesn't want to go to college. And they're like, but security. And I'm like, anyways, so we're currently fighting with our neighbor about that. But anyways, he'd come over, do a really good job. And our neighbor, his father owned a landscaping company growing up. And so he'd always like come by. And I remember last year we had like a neighborhood like block party kind of a thing. And we didn't tell anybody Landon was going through cancer because the Lord told us to stay silent until he was all the way through chemo. So here we are. I'm running 2 businesses. Landon's running his entire business from his chemo bed, from the hospital, taking sales calls, bald, all these different things. And literally no one other than like if you've seen Landon or, at church or something like that, knew that we were going through this because we were standing for our healing and standing for the health of our baby. And she's a miracle and all of that as well. And so it was so interesting because people would like our neighbors, right? They would finally see Landon like bald at this party and like they don't want to ask because but like like this guy doesn't have eyebrows and eyelashes and is bald and whatever. But we carry such a great spirit that it's like this juxtaposition that people like didn't even know how to handle. It was crazy. So they see this joy and the fruit of our life doesn't make sense with the circumstance that then they hear about. Right. And so we would finally, we told our neighbors like, oh yeah, like Landon just got out of chemo like 2 hours ago. He was just in the hospital for 6 days. And this is our 4th round. And they're like, we don't even know how to act, and here we are like happy and joyful. And I'm like 6 months pregnant. And this is what's so beautiful about living a spirit empowered life, you guys, and why the word of God is so important is like there should be a difference of the fruit of your life because we carry the Holy Spirit in us at all times. Now, I'm not saying that you can't have a bad day. I'm not saying that you can't have sad moments. I'm not saying to avoid your emotions, any of that, because that can get really toxic as well. But there are countless examples in the Bible of where people overcame absolutely crazy circumstances. And at the end of the day, we have to make a decision, just like we do at anything else in our life, to be walking in victory. It's why, and this isn't to condemn anybody, because I think we all know somebody that's either died of cancer or we've lost somebody or whatever. So again, hear my heart on this. Like I'm a wife who went through this, so I understand and I'm touched with all those emotions. But also like I believe in challenging people to grow in their knowledge of what's possible as a believer, because like I don't know about you, but I don't want anybody close to me dying if they don't have to, right? I want solutions to everything, whether it's a mental thing or an emotional thing or a physical thing, or a financial thing for that matter, right? So we have a responsibility as Christians to grow in our walk with the Lord. And that is not only in intimacy of how to speak in relationship with Him, but it's to steward every bit of wisdom 360 in our lives. And Landon's my husband, really learned this because you better believe when we were faced with that diagnosis, literally the same week that we were deciding to have children and try to start trying to have a family, we were faced with you may never have children, right? And so my point here today, my first point is like when you're facing a situation that is causing a robust emotion, you have a decision to make. And the fruitfulness or lack thereof of your life is completely based on how you choose to interpret that, how you choose to manage your thoughts and your emotions, and then what comes out of your mouth. Because you'll never do something that you don't first think, feel, and speak. And so in that instance, and some of you guys might have seen our full documentary. It's on YouTube. If you haven't looked it up, just go to Kingdom Culture Pod and you guys can watch the full 90-minute documentary that we literally shot 1 week after he got done with chemo. I was 7 months pregnant, just to like have a mile marker of that forever. And you can watch every single thing that we did to get him healed of cancer, to receive that healing. And, we had so many decisions along the way to come into agreement with what it looked like or to come into agreement with what we wanted to see in our lives. And so you might be thinking, okay, well, that's great. How does this relate to my current situation? Well, can I be your coach right now? We make excuses for so many things in our life. And some of them have very good reasons in theory. Negative emotions are trying to protect you at all times. So it's not comfortable, and it's not, can I be honest, societally normal to get uncomfortable on a regular basis. Especially as women, we are hardwired in the way that God created us in our software to want to fit in as a part of the pack. So how does this relate to our goals? Well, why haven't I started the business yet? Why haven't I placed in my pageant yet? Why haven't I found my husband yet? Why haven't I gotten the promotion yet? Why haven't I lost the weight yet? It's because we are hardwired to, at our most primal sense, most fleshly sense, to not want to break the mold. But guess what? Is that going to get us to being a 1% person who does something different than everybody else does? Nope. And that's why most people don't do it. But that's the crazy thing. It's not because you can't. That's the lie that has to be broken. It's not because you can't. It's not because you can't be the first person to graduate college in your family. It's not because you can't be the first millionaire in your family. It's not because you can't be the first person who looks like you, talks like you, walks like you to win your pageant or get straight A's or have a successful marriage that doesn't end in divorce. But you have to choose to break the paradigm of what's currently not working for you. And that's going to require getting uncomfortable. It's going to require saying bless and release to the old pattern, the old version, the old way of thinking, the old mindset, frankly, the old wineskins, to put it in biblical sense, and to take on and apply what's going to get you to the next level. I always say this in my pageant coaching. There's a difference between freebie seekers, researchers, people who are, constantly saying they're thinking about doing the thing, but when it really comes to putting their money where their mouth is and getting uncomfortable, they stop themselves. And I use that language really carefully, not as a condemnation or criticism by any sense, but because it is what it is. And one of the presuppositions that we talk about in neurolinguistic programming is called living at cause or effect. And what this means is when you live at cause, you start to take 100% responsibility for your life. And it doesn't mean that like God's not in control. It doesn't mean that like you're all of a sudden God or, any of that weird stuff. It's nothing like that. But it means that you're going to absolutely positively decide to stop living as a victim in every way of your life. Now, what's crazy is you could be living as a victor in many areas of your life, but a victim in another area. So one thing that's really empowering, and one of the things that we do in our coaching is like we take a life audit And I'm like, okay, go through, your workplace, your family, your friendships, your fitness, your finances, your goals, all of that. Am I living at effect, which means I believe things are happening. I'm carrying a belief consciously or unconsciously that something is happening to me rather than this just happened and it's neutral. And now I'm asking myself, what am I going to do about it? Some of you have never been taught to think that way and don't even know that's an option. Why do generations of people live in the projects? It's not because they can't get out of the projects. Look at many sports figures that they let that fuel them and they were like, this is the last time. This is the last time I'm going to step up and provide for my family, right? And we love a good success story like that, wherever it comes from. Maybe you have 4 generations of people where the male figure in the household was in prison. I have a friend like that. Every single person in his mom, his dad, all of his uncles had babies out of wedlock and were on meth. Every single person had been in jail. And he was the first person to say, I'm not going to do that. And I watched him struggle because there were those generational things that he hadn't cut off yet, that those are the only patterns that he had seen his entire life. And so what's really interesting about like motivation and even the way that God made us is there's push and pull motivation. And they both have their places, right? So like even with my friend, this like chasing motivation was always like, don't be like that. Don't be like mom. Don't be like dad. Don't be like this. Don't be like my big brother. Don't be like this. And it's like this old version of you is chasing you in your head. That's causing you to like, it's almost like don't energy rather than do energy. Does that make sense? So it's like, well, here are all the things that I'm running away from that I can't be. But remember last week when we talked about, okay, don't think about this pink wall.